Hey everyone, I've got the deck that I used for 2 city championships, one weekend to the next. And in the first one, it's Blackpool. I came second, losing to Yveltal in the final. And then second week was Loughborough, just yesterday in fact, and I came first, beating Yveltal in the final. Had some quite interesting games throughout the day, like on both days. It's not really so much of a tournament report. I will mention had some very, very good games against a local poker dad in the UK, Scott Simmons. So shout out to him. There was some really good games. I mean, some of them were a bit bad, but because that's what Ghetsis sort of does. But otherwise, they were pretty good. I'll just go through the list and tell you what's what. I didn't change a card from one weekend to the next, and currently in this format, I don't know if I'd change even a single card from this. Like, there are many options. I can go through a list of those, but I'll go through that after. So for starters, I use 3 Toad. 3 Seismitoad EX. Yeah, you only ever use Quaking Punch. I'm sure everyone knows what it does by now. If not, you can just read it here. Yeah, basically the whole point of these Toad decks always will be and has been to shut off your opponent doing things, essentially, and just hitting for some damage over and over until you take prizes. Hence you run, crushing hammers and such like that. This obviously is Toadina though. So you also run 2 Giratina EX, and I mean, Renegade Pulse is okay because it helps you quite a lot against like Mega Manectric, well, even like Mega Mewtwo, Mega Sceptile, which aren't as common, but I did play against Mega Mewtwo, as I said. So yeah, Renegade Pulse, it's pretty useful against those, can be shut off with Hex. However, Chaos Will is the attack we'll really use. Basically, Quaking Punch didn't quite do enough damage, so they looked at Quaking Punch and went, you know what, we need a thing that does different things but does a lot more damage. So instead you just can't use you can't play tools, special energy or stadium cards, which is there's a bit of overlap with Toad there in that you can't use tools, which is obviously really horrible against like megas and things like that. They can't use their mega they can't use their Spirit Link to Mega Evolve, so they'll often lose a turn in doing so. So yeah, it's pretty strong. It's just there for heavier damage and still having a locking effect. Against some decks, in fact, the locking effect that Giratina offers is stronger, say Night March perhaps, if they're not using the Mew version and are going for the fast Hex version with like only 4 double Colorless. But I think in Expanded people don't really go for that one. But yeah, it's okay against like Yveltal, except that they can then use their dark patches. But there are some little strategies here and there to to mitigate like Yveltal getting tons of energy on and killing your Giratina. As for the support Pokemon, I use Keldeo for the whole Russian retreat effect, using Floatstone. That's just because you want to switch between Toads, you want to switch between Toad and Tina. You may even wish to Sky Return at some point. It actually has an attack, but you never use it, or at least like it will be a last resort, because you need 2 double Colorless on there. I've not actually won a game yet using Secret Sword, which is obviously very sad. But yeah, it's really useful utility Pokemon. Run a Hoopa, because basically you need a bunch of different EXs. You might start with, say you often start with the Toad, because it's the highest count basic. Not all the time obviously, but say if you start with the Toad, you play down the Hoopa, you get, say, Jirachi for Ghetsis or whatever supporter you want, Shaymin to draw more if you need it, Keldeo so that you can get the Floatstone on it, Russian Retreat, and say either another Toad or a Giratina. Just gives you loads of options. Jirachi is, I can't believe I'm going to say this, kind of a little star. yeah, I'm just letting that joke sink in for a bit. It's maybe the worst joke I've said, but yeah, he's kind of he's just incredible in this deck. When you play him, you get a supporter, and well, there are lots of one-off supporters this deck wants, and there is a certain supporter you want to often get turn 1, which is Ghetsis, or as you know, that's turn 1 going first, so that you can shut off your opponents, so that you just get rid of your opponent's items, and they can often draw dead just from that. Because now, how decks run is a bit lighter on the supporter count, much heavier on going for Ultra Balls and trying to get Shaymins to draw loads and then play a supporter. So you can often just destroy a whole hand. In fact, I actually did that a couple of times where I Ghetsis and they had 6 items. I got rid of all of them. And it's also happened to me the other way around. In fact, last week I lost game 2 of the final due to being Ghetsis for 6. 2 Shaymin, just because 3 you don't really have the bench space for, and you play Jirachi, so that's fine. You often need 1 early game, 1 late game. You also play super scoop ups to pick them up, so if you're going a bit aggressive for a certain card early game, you know you have quite a large chance of getting it due to all the draw that you can get from the super scoop ups. So yeah, that's the Pokemon line. I'll now go through the supporter line. For Juniper, just because you want to go through your deck, you don't need to like mill yourself or anything particular. You just need to hit into like important cards often. So for Juniper helps you do that. 1 N, because N's like one of the strongest utility cards, especially late game, or say if in the middle of the game you've been attacking with Seismitoad. Now you need to attack with Giratina, and they've taken say 2 or 4 prizes. Well, say against certain decks, they're going to be using a lot of their items again after you do this. A lot. So what you can do is just end them to a low hand, then Chaos will, and then, I mean, it's hoping, but it's quite likely they won't have any items that they can even play. 2 Lysandre. I've seen some decks, some lists of this only run 1. I run 2 just because I often just seem to play it when I have it, because you can just say Lysandre up a Hoopa, hit it for 50. What that does often is gives you a late game win condition with Giratina hitting it for 120. The other reason as well is it stops them hitting you, which some of the decks like Mega Mewtwo or Yveltal can just keep trying to hit you and eventually just wear you down. But yeah, Lysandre helps quite a lot with that. So I run 2. I've seen some decks only run 1. I run like 1 Hex Maniac. It's just, I mean, I'd say primarily for Blastoise, but it's just got pretty good utility all around. You can shut off their Shaymins if you know that's their only draw, and that's kind of it, honestly. Like, you shut off Aegislash as well, but that's not really as big. It's not really seen much either. Onto Ghetsis. Ghetsis is one of my favourite cards in this deck. It's when you play it, you see your opponent's hand, which is great anyway because it's hand knowledge, and then they have to shuffle in all the items, and then you draw the number of cards equal to the number of items they had. So why that's really strong is you can do that turn 1, and in effect it's like you've Quaking Punched, because they can't play items from their hand except if of course they already have, say, a Shaymin or a Juniper or something else in hand ready to draw. Then they can play any items they come across. I've seen some arguments saying actually Hex Maniac is stronger turn 1 because you shut off their Shaymins, and so the argument for Ghetsis obviously is that you get rid of Ultra Balls for Shaymins, and so Hex is like, why not just shut off the Shaymins? However, I don't fully agree with this argument, because what they can just do is play that Ultra Ball, grab a Shaymin, and then wait till next turn and just play the Shaymin for the number they want. So yeah, I'm not really in too much agreement with that. Ghetsis is of course very random. It's dependent on what your opponent's opening hand is. You can change that randomness, say, by running a red card, so you've at least lowered their hand, and then you can like nuke it completely. But also the other thing it has above like turn 1 Hex is that it actually draws you cards. So it's actually a really scummy card, because the worse your Ghetsis is against your opponent, the worse it is for you. But the better it is against your opponent, the better it is for you as well. If you knock 6 cards out their hand, you draw 6. So it's yeah, it's a very, very RNG kind of card. Not really the sort of card I like to define a game or be a big part of a game, but it currently is, and you can't really get away with not playing it in this deck. Like, it's been a consideration of mine to just cut one of the Junipers for a second Ghetsis, because the card's just so strong in this deck. When everyone needs Shaymin to draw, like I've seen even decks like Groudon running one Shaymin, like you need Shaymin to draw. Ghetsis just gets rid of the Ultra Balls that, you know, weren't out in the past but are now out. So yeah, just really strong. You know, you might question like, how likely is it to get Ghetsis turn 1? And I don't know the exact percentages. I'd probably say it doesn't reach 50%. But if you just start with an Ultra Ball, actually no, it must be over 50%. Because if you start an Ultra Ball, you basically have it, assuming Jirachi's not prized. The chance of starting an Ultra Ball is 40% if you run 4. So that's quite reasonable. Another out is Hoopa to get Jirachi. Another out is, of course, the Jirachi. Another out is Computer Search, so that's 7. And, of course, the Ghetsis itself. That's 8. So I don't know exact percentage of 8. Starting 1 of 8 cards in your opening hand, and I'm not about to work it out now, and it's not double the chance of starting 4, in case anyone was wondering. I'd hazard a guess at it being around 60-70%. So yeah, it is actually above, and of course you do have Shaymins for draw, and Super Scoop Ups as well to reuse the Shaymins and draw more and more and more. And in fact, I only worked out the chance of starting it in your opening hand, not the chance of drawing it off the top as the 8th card as such. So yeah, it's really quite possible you do start Ghetsis, or have a way to get it. Yeah, I think I've said enough about this card now. I'd play that card. Yeah, Colress is one of the like stronger mid-game supporters. Even early game it's been quite strong, where you can just shuffle your hand into your deck, you fill up your bench basically all the time, you draw between 8 and 10, so your opponent has to fill up, like, has to play the Pokemon down as they get them, because they might be end, they might never get those Pokemon again. So you basically get large Colresses. Having a lot of cards in your hand's good. 4 versus Seeker, because why wouldn't you? Even in a Toad heavy format, I'd probably still play 4. In fact, I've always played 4, even in Toad heavy formats. Just undeniably strong. Gets you back, especially with so many one-off supporters. 6 one-off supporters, 2 Lysandres. You have the chance to reuse any of these up to like, well, you can use them 5 times in a game. And you have like the options to pick. No compressor though in this deck, because strange enough, all your cards are kind of resources. Like even Ultra Balling 2 cards away often doesn't feel that great unless they are supporters, and then that's kind of like your compressor light as such. But yeah, I've considered a compressor in here, but there's not really much to cut for it. Another thing I'm not running actually is also Trainer's Mail, because while the chance to get an item is good, and this deck runs let me think, well, it's 43 trainers, and 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 10, 11, 12, and then 2 stadiums, so 14, so 29 items. That's over half your deck. You should be hitting at least 1 every time. So you think that'd be great because you'd hit an item every time, but the fact is there just aren't 4 deck slots for Trainer's Mails, even 3, because every item you have you need. So or you need the chance to just hit it early, and then Trainer's Mail would only give you like equal, maybe higher chance of hitting that one card. But then say if you had to cut Super Scoop Up, you've lost one of your strongest utility cards. Laser, you've lost another one of your strongest utility cards. Crushing Hammer, so on, so on. I think you get the picture. Next, I'll just go to the ACE SPEC, so that's kind of how I order the deck. Just play computer search because you run special energy, gives you another out to like early game supporter such as Ghetsis, gives you, it's just an out to that exact card when you need it, such as Laser to finish the game. Yeah, and like out of a bad hand early. Really good card. Scoop Up Cyclone's the other consideration, or Dowsing Machine. Scoop Up Cyclone's just a guaranteed super scoop up, so that can be pretty strong. But I just prefer computer search. I've almost never computer search for super scoop up for what it's worth, so I don't feel I need Scoop Up Cyclone. 4 Ultra Ball because you want to get Pokemon and get Jirachi early. There's like no reason to not run 4 in this deck. They're not even necessarily that dead late game because you can use one to get a Shaymin just to fill your hand to try and dig for the Lysandre right at the end of the game. 4 Super Scoop Up, obviously like massive utility. Flip a coin if heads, put 1 Pokemon in your hand. You pick it up from the field. That means you can pick up, say, a damaged Seismitoad, go into a non-damaged Seismitoad. You could go from a damaged Seismitoad, or even a non-damaged Seismitoad, into a Giratina by picking up the energy, reattaching it. Sometimes it can be a bit annoying where you have to attach a double Colorless to a Giratina. I'm not saying that's necessarily bad, but most of the time you'd like to see those on a Seismitoad. And every now and then you might have to super scoop up a Giratina to get that double Colorless again to put it on a Seismitoad. Also, if you start with a bad active Pokemon and you don't have Keldeo Float turn 1, which is a very reasonable thing to not have turn 1, you can pick that Pokemon up and go into, say, Seismitoad. Yeah, I'd play 4 basically always in this deck. You could maybe cut to 3, but then you kind of want to hit at least 1 per game, and 1 and 3 is just, you know, higher than 1 and, well, 1 and 4 you have more chance of hitting at least 1 and 4 than you do 1 and 3, because you only need you only need luck that 1 out of 4 times, so you have that extra time. Hypnotoxic Laser just for the extra damage. Works really well with Toad. If you Quaking Punch with a Muscle Band, which I'll get to later, which hits for 80 with the Hypnotoxic Laser, then it'll be 110 coming into your turn, and then you can do another 80 going into their turn. So you can hit for you can take an EX knockout. If you ever flip heads with sleep and they don't have a way to remove it from the active, you take a KO on an EX with just Quaking Punch, do it, which starts off at such a measly 30, but you end up taking KO with Quaking Punch, which is pretty cool. And by cool I mean horrible. 4 Crushing Hammer just slows your opponent down. You obviously run 4. You could run 3 as well, but you kind of want to remove, in some decks in fact, you actually want to remove up to 3 using the Crushing Hammers. You have to get really lucky flips to do that. And like if you ever hit 4 out of 4 heads, you probably aren't losing that game. Like, I don't know, the deck would have to be really specific for 4 Crushing Hammer heads to not lose them the game, if that makes sense. Yeah, flip a coin of heads. It's got an energy attached to one of your opponent's Pokemon. Just pick an energy, discard it. Quite good against the Veltal as well, because you get rid of their Darks, and then they're in the discard, which they can recover with the baby Veltal, but often they'll need to be Dark Patching them, and they can't Dark Patch them if you're Quaking Punching. I run 1 Enhanced Hammer, just for the guaranteed removal of, say, a double Colorless before you go into Giratina. Then if they need a special energy to attack next turn, they won't be able to. Yeah, I can understand cutting to 0, but I always like the 1 because you more or less can play it when you have it, because most decks do run special energy now. It's only really Blastoise that doesn't. Where are we up to? Let's see. I think I've discussed Laser, so I'll just mention Virbank. It's the obvious stadium if you're playing Laser, just to up the damage. In fact, I didn't even... Laser actually only does 10 damage. I said 30 because obviously it's when Virbank's in play. You run 2 just because you do want them. You don't find too many Stadium Wars in Expanded. Let's think.
Blastoise runs 1 Rough Seas most of the time, which you beat out with 2 Virbanks. A Veltool runs Virbank. Other Toad decks run Virbank. I guess Manectric might run a higher count, or Night March with Dim Valley, but you know, you're generally fine against those kind of decks, and just any damage extra with Laser is quite strong. I run 3 Muscle Band, just because you don't actually need to go up to like 4 or anything, because you've got Super Scoop Ups to keep picking them up off Pokemon, reattach them to other Pokemon or the same Pokemon. It's really, it's not a card I'd like to drop to 2 of, because if you drop to 2 of this and you miss some Super Scoop Ups, then basically your Muscle Bands can just go and you never get really good use of them. When I said the Quaking Punch maths going up to 50, that's obviously having Muscle Band attached. If you only have 30, that's really not doing much. That's like 6 KOing an EX. Of course with Laser that does go up, but it goes up much quicker with Muscle Band. I run 2 Float just because you play Keldeo, Rush and Retreat. That style of you know, getting your active out of the active position, or getting another Pokemon into the active. So I just run 2. You know, you can put a Float on the first active if it's not an ideal Pokemon, and then later onto a Keldeo. That's really it. Not really much to say about that. 2 Headringer just slows down opponents even more. In case anyone's watching this and doesn't really know too much about this, you probably can't see the text behind the giant red thing that says Flare. So the attacks of this Pokemon this card is attached to cost Colorless more. Now the only thing you can attach it to is your opponent's EXs. So you attach it to, say, a Bigger Veltool, the EX, and then Evil Ball costs Dark, Colorless, and White Cyclone costs Dark, Colorless. And why that can be pretty good is if they have an Veltool EX stranded active without, say, a Rush and Retreat option, and they have, or they burnt many Dark Patches, then what you can do, if you need to switch to Giratina to attack, you can do that if they've only got 1 Dark Energy on it. They can't attach a DCE to attack because you've Chaos Willed them, and it's the idea is it being stuck active, so they can't Dark Patch it. So yeah, Headring is pretty strong in that regard. Otherwise you'd have to like knock them to 0 energy. It's pretty good against Megas as well, because you get it on before they get a tool. You can often do that turn 1. You can also Xerosic their tool and get your Headringer on them instead. That slows them down a lot. Like against Mega Manectric, they could be attacking turn 2 doing Turbo Bolt, but if you get a Headringer on, first they have to manually Mega Evolve, second of all they need 3 energy on, so the earliest they're doing that is turn 3, and they've had to pass a turn rather than attacking. So yeah, pretty strong card. I don't see a way to cut this and this deck still be as good. 4 double Colorless because you want to Quaking Punch as early as possible. I'm not gonna like dignify anything by by giving that card more time. You also can attach it to Giratina as a second energy to Chaos Will, because it requires 2 coloured energy and 2 colourless. You can also Sky Return. Not really going to happen too much. You can pretend to have Hypno Strike. One thing I found myself doing actually quite a bit is having, say, turn 1, having to attach a double colourless to Toad, or not fearing any energy removal, so doing it, and then turn 2, not finding a Float Stone for Keldeo, so having to attach a double colourless to Keldeo, rush in, and then retreat, discarding it in order to Quaking Punch. And you lose an energy in doing so, but you Quaking Punch earlier, which is the thing you need to do. Only 3 Double Dragon. Space is a bit of an issue, hence it's only 3. It's also because Giratina is really a secondary attacker in Expanded. In Standard, I actually run 3 Giratina and 4 Double Dragon energy, because you need to be hitting the higher damage more often, since you don't have other options such as Virbank and Hypnotoxic Laser. This of course only works on Giratina, you can't attach it to anything else, and very often I've needed to retreat something and only had Double Dragon in hand, but yeah, so be it. So there's the deck. I don't know if it's too fruitful showing any games right now, because a new set has come out, and so the you know, the meta will change, and new cards you'll want to include. You can consider putting in Puzzle of Time in here. So I won't show you that, but what I will show you is all the other options I've considered for this deck. So I will put these in on the spot. Here's the first one, suggested to me by Kyle Guest. Here's another. Which one? That's two options. I'm gonna basically show you what an ideal version of this deck would have. So AZ would be really nice. What was the other card I was trying to think of? No, I don't think. Oh yeah, just the other Double Dragon. So the ideal of this deck is 64 cards, which yeah, I mean, there's one more card. Oops, I did not mean to do that. There we go. A tool scrapper as well, so you can scrap their tools and then put your headringers on without having to Xerosic. Yeah, so this deck in ideal is 65 cards. You just have to make cuts. The reason I like the mana, so I'll go into the card choices as well. The reason I like the mana is because often the sleep, if you can sleep your opponent and they can't wake up, you can two-hit them with Quaking Punches, or even just have enough time to develop some kind of board presence. It gives you an extra energy attachment turn as well. It of course does take a bench space. The main reason it's not in is because it takes a deck space that I'd rather have other cards in for. Yeah, it's long distance hypnosis. Flip a coin if heads, your opponent's active is asleep. If tails, yours is. Of course that tails doesn't matter at all because you can rush in and retreat. You'd obviously rather flip heads and then Quaking Punch, but of course however much you give yourself the chance to put them to sleep, they always will have a 50% chance to wake up once you put them to sleep. So you're never getting it better than 50%, even if you have guaranteed sleep, you aren't doing so. So with two, say if I flip one laser and mana in a turn, basically it's 37.5 or something. It's not really actually that good. One Mewtwo, because the only thing that really stops this Toad-Tina deck dead in its tracks is, say, against Blastoise, if they power up a giant Keldeo and you just can't remove enough energy or kill it quickly enough and they kill 3 X's, you lose. Against Bigger Veltal, well, they slowly power up a Bigger Veltal and make you struggle to take KOs. Generally they can get like 2 Bigger Veltals per game. You manage to kill the first one generally just by toading or maybe going into Tina. But the second one, like, they just make a giant of Veltal, and this Mewtwo is a really nice way to kill it. Let's see, total, often they'll have, say, like 4 or 5 energy. Then all you need is 2 and a laser with Virbank. So, you know, you just attach the double Colorless. I prefer this over Lugia, even though Lugia has the second attack. For 2 reasons. The Mega Mewtwo, that as I didn't really think exists, but it does. This is quite strong against it. If you have, let's see, 5 energy between you and laser, you're doing 230. If you have Muscle Band, well, put it this way, you need very little to kill it with a Mewtwo, and often you can do that late game. What else did we have? Tool Scrapper, I think I actually mentioned it when putting it in. You just destroy their tools and replace them with your Headringer, or you can just destroy their tools and Quaking Punch and then they can't reattach. 1 AZ is really good because for the mirror match, you will be Quaking Punch, you'll be doing Quaking Punch against Quaking Punch, and if at some point you can just heal your Toad, which you can't do with Super Scoop Up, then you'll probably win that. You do, of course, discard the double Colorless and potentially the Muscle Band that's attached, but you can just go, you only ever do it, of course, if you have another double Colorless ready to go. I do believe that's every card I've discussed. Let me think. 1, 2, 3. Oh, of course, the fourth double dragon energy is just would be nice, but it's an extra card slot that we can't afford. I'll briefly discuss some of the like kind of more like I want to say next level plays, but I'll sound very pretentious, so I'll just say it anyway. Yeah, some of the more like next level things that I think some people might miss. Well, early game, it's rare, but it will happen that you attack with Chaos Will first. So I'm just going to go along lines with assuming we're Quaking Punching from, you know, our first attack. The only time you don't is, say, if you're going first and you attach to a Tina first to threaten either of the Tina or the Toad, and then you go into, and then just the Chaos Will is better for whatever reason. But yeah, I'll just assume you're Quaking Punching. Now, sometimes you'll need to switch to Giratina to take a big knockout, to take an important knockout, but of course then they can play a multitude of items. So on that turn, when you need to, you can Versus Seeker for the Ghetsis that you probably played turn 1, and then remove all the items from their hand and attack. They probably saved a bunch of Versus Seekers to be able to get back a supporter on the turn that you have to Giratina, and then they'll lose them all. They may have like one supporter in hand, but unless it's Juniper, which they probably would be playing because they're under item lock, then there's not too much to worry about. If you either know they have a Shaymin in hand or feel it's quite likely, then you can Hex Maniac instead on the same turn. So yeah, there's that's like a play you could also do with Mewtwo if you happen to put Mewtwo in the deck, but I personally haven't. So I'll just go back to the original list so that we're not stuck on this. I believe that was it. Yeah, as for other plays, often what I found myself doing is I happen to have like a hand with, say, 4 supporters, or even 3 supporters. I've got Xerosic, Flare Grunt, Juniper, and then like an item card that I can't use for whatever reason. What I often do, it depends on what I'm against, but say I was against a Mega Mewtwo deck, and the Mega Mewtwo was asleep, and it just had a double Colorless on it. I was doing, I Quaking Punched it once without a Muscle Band. I think it had done 60 total. Obviously, if it woke up, another DC could just be attached. No, you might just, I had nothing but a Toad active, by the way. Actually, probably should have mentioned that. Yeah, I think the other item was like Super Scoop Up. And nothing but a Toad active. Of course, I can Juniper to try and set up a bit of a better field, but nothing's really happening for them if I just remove the energy. So instead of setting up with Juniper, I can hold that for a turn, remove one of their energies with the Team Flare Grunt, and then essentially I've not net gained a turn. Well, I've lost a turn by doing that, but gained a little bit of damage. They've lost the turn of attachment, so they're about equal there, but of course I've removed one of their energies. So, and the other thing is, with the Juniper, there's no guarantee I actually go into a Crushing Hammer to remove the energy, and even if I do set up a field, that Toad could just die straight away. So it's like a trick. I guess it's taken me quite a while to learn. Is sometimes it's better to just be patient. A friend actually noted that I'm doing much better in just being very patient, holding, like going nuts until I really have to. One thing, I was playing, unfortunately in top 4, I had to play for time, because game 1 took quite a while, which was on the side of Mega Mewtwo winning. Then game 2 was on the side of me winning. Now, I had a Versus Seeker, and I could tell time was going to come. I didn't know exactly when, obviously. So, and I had basically nothing else. But instead of Versus Seekering for a supporter to draw more, I just Versus Seekered for Lysandre, because that would give me a win, because no prizes had been taken. And that gave me a win condition on, say, a Jirachi or a Shaymin, doing knocking it out with the Giratina.
or even like locking something active and just quaking punching it a few turns. And in fact, that actually was what gave me the win. So yeah, a play that people probably wouldn't necessarily expect is just to Versus Seeker for a Lysandre and then sit on it for like 2 turns. But that's what I did, and I saw that was going to be the only real way to win that game, because I didn't think, I knew no more prizes would be taken from either side, and that did actually lead to me winning the game. So yeah, there you have it. In Expanded, this netted me 90 points so far, and in Standard, obviously a different version of the list, has netted me 120 points, something like that. That was from 2 regionals, a top 8 and a top 16. In Standard, this suffers from a lot more problems. It doesn't like Mega Mewtwo or Yveltal. But in Expanded, you can actually hold your own against both. And I'd say it's probably one of the best decks as of right now. I don't really feel it has any auto loss. Mega Mewtwo is one of the hardest matchups, but with Laser you have a chance. Even against Wailord, because you're quaking punching, like, I know they play a lot of supporters, but you can end up still killing them, still killing that Wailord. If you Ghetsis and remove some of their items turn 1, you can often attach an energy and keep that energy down. They can't really, well, they obviously play nothing else to draw into those supporters, so they have to just get lucky on what supporters they get. So yeah, there's, and also you can actually headring the Wailord before they say Hard Charm or, what's the other card? Assault Vest. So yeah, really strong deck, doesn't really suffer any auto losses. Its worst matchup is against a deck with 14 Flare Grunt or 4 Xerosic. There's nothing really else that's really bad. Metal can be a bit of a struggle if they get a good start or a good setup. Even Jirachi, the Jirachi promo is a bit tough, but first they remove an energy. But of course, Laser kills them coming into your turn. So even though if you Quaking Punch and lose another energy, that can still actually be fine, because though you've lost 2 energy, you've probably won the game. Not necessarily from that position, but reasonably often. The other thing you can do is, of course, remove the energy, hope they don't have another. You can often Lysandre around it, and then Lysandre it for a kill later with a Quaking Punch and a Hypnotoxic Laser. Because, of course, it doesn't shut off you attack. You're attacking... you attacking them, or your attack. It shuts off you hurting that specific Jirachi. So yeah, I had to, I played against a deck with the Jirachi. In fact, that was my only loss of the day, but it wasn't because of the Jirachi. It was because of Yveltal. So, yeah, pretty good deck. I'm going to stop saying the phrase so, and let you all go. I'm not going to play any games with this, as I said, because Breakpoint's now out. So you're probably not going to see anything too representative. Maybe just because the format hasn't changed that much, like I said, you probably can just include some puzzles of time and roll with this deck. I don't really see too much changing from this. So, yeah, well, hopefully not too many people play this, to be honest, at City Championships or the regionals, because it makes for some slow games. They can be quite tense, but I'm not sure if I'd say exciting, because that tension is, can my opponent draw out of me crushing, hammering and quaking punching them, and their tension is, can I draw out of that exact same thing. So yeah, there's not really too much exciting in the deck. One thing I'd actually recommend is trying, building a deck that manages to counter both this and Yveltal will put you in really good stead for some City Championships. I wouldn't say all of them. Definitely here in the UK, since those 2 are probably the most played decks. As long as what you build can handle Archistoise, because otherwise you won't get very far. Those are the 3 most popular decks, I'd say. So yeah, build this, enjoy playing games with it, or don't. Whatever. See ya.